I watched them pull Sarah into Devil's Canyon like she was just a bag of grain. 5 men on horses, faces covered, moved fast through the dust. Her screams bounced off the canyon walls until they were gone. I was getting my horse a drink at Miller's Creek when I heard gunshots from the Hendricks place. By the time I got there, smoke was coming from their house, and old Jim Hendricks was on the ground, shot in the back. Sarah was gone. The horse tracks told the whole story. They took her alive. My hands shook as I got my gun ready. Sarah wasn't just any woman. She was the only person in this awful place who saw me as more than just a wanted man. 3 months. I go when I rode into Copper Ridge with a shot shoulder and no money. She cleaned my wound and gave me food without asking about the blood on my clothes. The sun was already setting, making the canyon entrance look like a dark grave. A smart man would wait for daylight, maybe get help from town. But I knew these men. I'd seen what they did before. Bodies left in shallow holes, women found days later, if they were lucky. Sarah didn't have days, probably not even hours, I thought. About her smile last Sunday after church, how her hand held mine when she gave me the songbook. For the first time, I'd thought about settling down, buying land, and living without always looking over my shoulder. Now her screams were stuck in my mind, and those dreams felt like they belonged to some other fool. The canyon looked like the mouth of hell. Somewhere in that maze of rocks, 5 killers held the only woman who ever made me want to be better. They probably thought no one would be dumb enough to follow them into Devil's Canyon at night. It was a death trap, even in daylight. Tight paths, loose rocks, and many ways to get lost for good. I checked my guns again and pushed my horse toward the canyon entrance. The animal felt the danger and pulled back, but I made him go. As we stepped into the shadows, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Sarah's voice. Faint but clear, calling my name from deep in the dark. But I didn't know yet that following that voice would lead me right into a trick that had been 20 years in the making. The horse prints in the canyon dirt told a story I didn't want to believe. 8 horses, not 5. More men had been waiting inside, meaning this wasn't just a simple crime, it was planned. I followed the trail deeper into the maze of red rock walls that stood over me like the bones of a giant animal. My horse's hooves made sounds that bounced off the walls, coming back like whispers from the dead. Every shadow could hide a gun. Every rock could hide a surprise attack. The trail split into 3 paths about a mile in. I got off my horse and looked at the ground in the moonlight, trying to understand the signs. The main group went left, toward the old hidden caves, but 2 riders went right, and one of those horses carried extra weight. My gut told me they split up on purpose, sending the main group one way as a fake, while a smaller team took Sarah somewhere else. These weren't just random people looking for easy money. They knew this canyon, knew how to move through it, knew how to vanish. I thought about Marcus Cole and his group. They'd been herding towns from here to Silver Falls. Cole was smart enough to plan this and mean enough to take a woman just to watch a man suffer trying to save her. We had a past, him and I, 5 years ago. I was the one who put his brother in the ground after a bank job went bad. The wind picked up, bringing the smell of wood smoke from ahead. They'd made camp, sure enough, to light a fire. That told me they weren't worried about being followed, meaning they either had more men than I counted or picked their spot carefully. I tied my horse to a dead tree and kept going on foot, gun in hand. The smoke came from the left trail, the easy choice, but my gut screamed that it was too simple to clean. Cole would leave a path right into a killing zone. 20 yards further, I found what I was looking for. A torn piece of blue cloth caught on a bush branch. Sarah wore a blue dress last Sunday. But this cloth was on the right trail, not the left where the smoke was. I hid behind a large rock and tried to think like Cole. He'd expect me to follow the main trail, walk right into his trap. But he'd also know I might be smart enough to see the trick, meaning the right trail could be a trap too. The smart thing was to go around, try to get above them, and see what I was dealing with. But time was against me. Every minute I spent being careful was another minute Sarah was in their hands. I heard a woman scream from the right trail, sharp and desperate, then suddenly stopped. But something about that scream didn't feel right. It sounded almost fake, like someone trying too hard to sound scared. That scream was wrong, too perfect, too timed. Sarah screamed like a wild cat when she was truly scared. I'd heard it once. When a snake got into her chicken coop, this sounded like someone who is told exactly when and how to scream. I took the middle path instead, the one with no tracks. If Cole was playing games, he wouldn't expect me to ignore both obvious choices. The tight passage made me walk single file along a narrow path, barely wide enough for my boots. One wrong step, and I'd fall 60 feet to the rocks below. Halfway along the path, I found something that made my stomach turn. A child's rag doll, worn and torn, stuck in a crack in the rock. Below it, carved into the stone with something sharp, were the letters M.W. Age 7. This wasn't the first time Cole had used this canyon. The doll was old, maybe months old, and those letters were carved with the desperate care of someone trying to leave a last message. A little girl named M.W. had been here before Sarah, and it looked like she never got out. My hands squeezed my gun as things started to make sense. This wasn't about stealing or getting even. This was about something much worse. Cole wasn't just taking women. He was collecting them, and Devil's Canyon was his hunting ground. I kept going along the path until it opened into a small clearing hidden between tall rock walls. What I saw there almost made me fall. 3 wooden crosses stuck in the ground, each marking a shallow grave. Fresh dirt on one of them, maybe a week old at most. Carved into each cross was a woman's name and age. Martha Walsh, 19. Rebecca Stone, 23. And the fresh grave, Maria Santos, 16. Cole wasn't just a killer. He was a collector, and he'd been using this place as his own graveyard for who knows how long. Sarah wasn't his first victim, and unless I stopped him tonight, she wouldn't be his last. I heard voices coming up from below, men talking in low, short tones. Following the sound, I crept to the edge of the clearing and looked down into a hidden valley I hadn't known was there. 3 campfires burned below, and I counted at least a dozen men moving around. This wasn't just Cole's gang. This was an army. But what truly scared me was what I saw in the middle of their camp. A wooden cage big enough for a person with iron bars that shined in the firelight. And next to it, another cage that wasn't empty. A woman sat inside, her long, dark hair covering her face, but when she looked up at the sound of footsteps, I saw something that made my world spin. It wasn't Sarah in that cage. It was Maria Santos, the girl who was supposed to be buried under that fresh cross. She was alive, meaning Cole wasn't just killing these women. He was keeping some of them. Maria Santos was supposed to be dead. I'd been at her funeral in Silver Falls just last week. Watched her mother throw dirt on what I thought was her daughter's grave. But there she was, very much alive, sitting in that cage like she'd been there for months. This meant Cole had been playing a much longer game than anyone realized. He wasn't just taking women, okay? He was making them disappear completely. Fake their deaths, let their families bury empty boxes, then keep them hidden in this canyon hell where no one would ever think to look. I counted the men again, 15, maybe 16, all armed and spread around the camp in ways that showed military thinking. Cole had been an army leader before he became a bad guy, and it showed in how he ran this operation. Guards at every entrance, weapons hidden in good spots, escape routes planned and marked. but I still didn't see Sarah anywhere, meaning she was either in one of the tents or they'd taken her somewhere else entirely. The thought of leaving Maria in that cage made my skin crawl, but charging down there would just get all three of us killed. I made my way around the edge of the valley, looking for a better view, when I heard footsteps on the rocks behind me. I spun around with my gun up, but it was too late. 3 men had me surrounded, guns pointed at my chest. "Marcus said you'd come," the biggest one said with a gold-toothed smile. "Said you were too stupid and too sweet on that Hendricks girl to stay away." They marched me down into the camp at gunpoint, and I got my first close look at Marcus Cole. In 5 years, he'd aged hard. His hair had gray streaks, and his face had new marks. But his eyes still held that same cold smartness that made him dangerous even when he wore a uniform. "Well, well," he said, getting up from by one of the fires. The famous wanted man walking right into my house. "Tell me, friend, how does it feel to be the one chased for once?" I kept my mouth shut and my eyes moving, checking guns and positions. Maria Santos was watching from her cage, her dark eyes wide with both hope and fear. Close up, I could see she'd been there for weeks, maybe longer. Her dress was torn and dirty, her face thin from poor food and little sleep. "You're probably wondering about our little collection," Cole said, looking where I was looking. "See? I learned something important in the army. Fear is a strong weapon, but hope is even better. Keep them alive, keep them hoping for rescue, and they'll do anything you ask." He walked over to Maria's cage and ran his fingers along the bars. "Little Maria here has been very helpful, haven't you, dear? Tell our friend what happens to girls who don't help." Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "They get buried alive." Cole nodded, pleased. Smart girl. "Now, about Miss Hendricks. She's a bit more lively than our usual guests, but I think she'll calm down once she sees what happened to the last man who tried to save one of my girls." He waved to 2 of his men, who dragged a body from behind one of the tents. Even in the firelight, I knew the star badge on the dead man's vest. Sheriff Tom Bradley from Copper Ridge, the man who was looking for Maria Santos. But what made my blood run cold wasn't seeing Bradley's body. It was what Cole pulled out of his coat pocket next, a letter with my name on it in writing I knew. Sarah had written me a letter, and somehow Cole had it before I did. Cole opened Sarah's letter slowly, like a man enjoying his win. The paper crackled in the firelight as he unfolded it, his eyes reading the words I'd never gotten to read. "Listen to this," he said to his men, loud enough for Maria to hear from her cage. "My dearest James, I know we haven't talked about it directly, but I believe God has brought us together for a reason. If you're reading this, then you've already made your choice. You've decided I'm worth the risk." My stomach twisted. Sarah had planned to give herself to me fully, and somehow Cole had stopped that moment before it could happen. But how did he get the letter? Sarah was supposed to give it to me yesterday evening. "She's quite the loving one, your Sarah," Cole went on, his voice full of fake feelings. "She goes on for 2 pages about building a life together, about the kids you might have, about getting old on some small farm away from all the fighting." He looked up at me with those cold eyes, touching really. Almost makes a man want to believe in happy endings. He folded the letter and put it back in his coat. Of course, she wrote this 3 days ago, before she knew what her daddy really was. The words hit me hard. "What are you talking about?" Cole's grin got wider. "You don't know, do you? About Jim Hendricks and his little deal with me. About how he's been giving me information on which farms to rob, which families had money worth taking. I thought about the scene at the Hendricks place, old Jim on the ground, shot in the back. But now that I thought about it again, something felt wrong about how his body was lying, about the lack of marks from fighting on his hands. Jim Hendricks was my inside man for 2 years, Cole said. He gave me everything I needed to know about every family within 50 miles. In return, I left his farm alone and split the money with him, half and half. Maria spoke up from her cage. Her voice stronger now. He's lying. Sarah found out about her father 3 days ago. That's why she's really here. Cole hit Maria through the bars, the sound sharp like a gunshot. Shut your mouth, girl, but the damage was done. Things were making sense now, and the picture they formed made me sick. Sarah hadn't been taken. She came here willingly, probably trying to make some kind of deal to save the families her father had betrayed. Where is she? I asked. Cole pointed toward a larger tent at the far end of the camp. She's been trying to bargain for the lives of everyone her daddy helped me rob. Quite the little hero, offering herself to get them off the hook. I was never planning to give in. But what he said next made my blood freeze. The funny thing is, she actually thinks you're coming to save her. She doesn't know that you're already. Too late. The tent flap opened and Sarah stepped out. But she wasn't the woman I remembered. Her blue dress was clean, her hair was brushed and tied up, and she walked with the sure steps of someone who belonged here. When she saw me tied up by the fire, she didn't look surprised or scared. She looked let down. You shouldn't have come, James, she said, her voice lacking the warmth I remembered. This was supposed to be simple, clean. My mind struggled to understand what I was seeing. This was the woman who bandaged my wounds and gave me soup when I was bleeding and broken. The woman who smiled at me in church and made me believe I could be more than just a killer for money. Sarah, what the hell is going on? She sat down on a wooden box across from me, smoothing her dress like we were having tea instead of sitting in a bad guy's camp, surrounded by killers and people who steal. My father was weak. James, he took their money, but he also kept notes, thought he could use them as protection if Marcus ever turned on him. Stupid man didn't realize that keeping proof of your crimes isn't safety. It's a death sentence. Cole moved to stand behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder like he owned her. Sarah came to me with a deal. Clean up her father's mess, get rid of the people who could link him to our operations, and in return, she'd help us grow into new areas. I stared at the woman I thought I loved, trying to find any hint of the person. I believed her to be the letter you wrote. That letter, knowing I'd never get it. I wrote it to make sure you'd come alone, she said simply. Marcus needed you dead, and I needed it to look like you died trying to be a hero. Better for everyone if people remember you as the man who died trying to save an innocent woman instead of the killer you really are. Maria Santos spoke up from her cage, her voice cutting through the night air like a sharp knife. Tell him about the others, Sarah. Tell him about Rebecca and Martha. Sarah's calm broke for a moment. Shut up. She picked them out, Maria continued, ignoring Sarah's angry look. Rode into town, made friends with the lonely girls, the ones with no family to miss them too much. Then she'd tell Marcus where to find them. The full horror of it hit me like a cold wave. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been Cole's helper, picking out victims for his collection. Every woman in those graves, every girl who disappeared without a trace, Sarah had marked them for death. You're a monster, I whispered. Sarah stood up and walked over to me, kneeling. So we were eye to eye. I'm a survivor, James. My father was going to get us all killed with his weakness and his guilt. I did what I had to do to stay alive. She reached out and touched my face with fingers that felt like ice. I did care for you, in my own way. That's why I'm going to make this quick. But as she spoke, I noticed something she'd missed. Maria had been working at the lock on her cage with something sharp, maybe a piece of metal from the cross I'd seen earlier. The lock was old and rusty, and she was almost through. Sarah pulled a small gun from her dress pocket and put it against my head. Any last words for the man you thought you loved? I looked her straight in the eyes and said the only thing that mattered now, Maria, now. Maria burst out of her cage like a wild cat, full of anger and desperation, hitting Sarah before anyone could react. The gun went off, the bullet whizzing past my ear and hitting the rocks behind me. Both women fell to the ground hard, rolling and fighting in the dirt. Cole's men went for their guns, but they stopped, afraid to shoot with Sarah. In the middle of the fight, that pause cost them everything. I rolled behind the nearest rock as Maria and Sarah's fight moved them toward the fire. And Maria did something that changed everything. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung it in a wide arc, sending hot bits of wood onto the dry bushes around the camp. In seconds, flames were racing up the canyon walls, cutting off the bad guys' escape routes and turning their hiding place into a death trap. In the confusion, I managed to free my hands from the ropes. Cole was yelling orders at his men, trying to get them to put out the fire, but it was too late. The flames were spreading faster than they could stop them, and the smoke was already making it hard to breathe. Sarah broke free from Maria and dove for the small gun, but I was faster. My boot came down on her wrist hard enough to break bone, and she screamed as the gun slid away into the darkness. When she looked up at me, her fake self was gone completely. No more pretending to love or be innocent, just raw hate and the fierce anger of an animal caught in a trap. "You have no idea what you've done," she snarled. This was bigger than just Cole's plan. There are people in every town from here to California who are part of this. Rich people, powerful people. They'll hunt you down for ruining their supply. Maria appeared beside me, Cole's rifle in her hands. She's lying about being forced into this. I heard her planning the whole thing with Cole. She enjoyed picking out the girls who would suffer the most. The fire was spreading too fast now. Half of Cole's men were already running up the canyon walls, leaving their leader and their prisoner. Cole himself stood near the edge of the camp, his face a mask of rage and planning as he watched his power burn. "This isn't over," he yelled over the sound of the flames. "I know who you are, wanted man. I know where you go when you think you're safe." He turned and vanished into the smoke, leaving Sarah behind to face what she'd done. Sarah tried to run, but Maria was ready for her. The rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls, and Sarah fell to the ground, finally paying the price for all the innocent lives she'd helped ruin. As we climbed out of that burning hell, Maria and I both knew we'd lived through something that would stay with us forever. But we'd also ended a bad dream that had been destroying lives across the area for years. The woman I thought I loved was dead, but somehow. Riding away from Devil's Canyon with Maria Santos beside me, I felt more free than I had in years.